my Instagram as well, which is like A and then that under dash thingy, and Monthei, my last name.
Under dash thingy. Aren't
Like,
you an editor of like a very?
yeah, well, that's the thing is I just look at it all day. I don't have to say it out loud.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Remote No Pressure podcast. We're super excited that you're listening another week. This week we are featuring Amanda Monthei. She fights fires, she fly fishes, and she even has time every once in a while to contribute to the Flyfish Journal and the Ski Journal. You guys are in for a treat. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, we have Amanda Monthei with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Amanda.
Hi, yeah, thank you.
Now, you're a native Michigander, am I correct?
I am, yeah. I grew up in northern Lower Michigan, about a half an hour south of the Mackinac Bridge.
Okay, and now where are you at currently?
I live in Bellingham, Washington.
Okay, and what kind of? I know the answers to these questions, Amanda, but I want to because I got your bio. But can you tell us a little bit about fighting fires?
Absolutely, yeah. I spend my summers fighting fires it's been Idaho the last 2 seasons. So hoping to get on a crew maybe in Western Washington or in Oregon this year. But I've been on hand crews. It's been relatively busy. Last summer was the busiest summer I've had. But I've loved being in Idaho, and I've loved sort of learning the ins and outs of fire and fire suppression and fire behavior. It's something that you go into and it's like completely foreign. I was completely unfamiliar with the strategies of fire suppression when I got into this, and it's been really empowering to learn about it and to learn about it with a bunch of really intelligent and really hardworking people, and seeing really incredible places along the way. It's been awesome.
Now, was it that job that took you to Idaho, or was it fly fishing?
Okay, well, I mean, I might have had ulterior motives about choosing Idaho. I was in the first summer. I was in an area that didn't really have a ton of fishing. It was up in north Idaho, north of Coeur d'Alene. But when I chose salmon. I was in salmon last summer, Salmon, Idaho, and that was maybe slightly because of the great fishing and great fisheries in that area, the Salmon River, the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, all the little tributaries around there, and also just being right over the Continental Divide from the Bitterroot Valley and all the fishing up near Missoula, Montana. It was maybe an ulterior motive for being in that region. Uh, but I did do quite a bit of fishing on my days off last year, as much as I could anyway.
Well, that's great. And let me ask you this question: how did you end up getting into fishing, into fly fishing in particular, Amanda?
The common story. I by a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend of mine, when I was like 18, and I like really, honestly, when I first started, I didn't care too much about it. I was like, oh well, this is something I can do with my boyfriend at the time, and then he kept taking me out and like making me go and not making me, I didn't enjoy it, but he kept taking me out and he kept always talking about fly fishing and he kept tying flies in front of me, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is actually something worth like investing some thought into, and I ended up really starting to enjoy it and learn some steelhead tactics from him and learned a lot of what I know from him, and I'm really grateful for that. But then when we broke up, I made a sort of conscious decision to continue fly fishing despite not dating this person that introduced me to it. And I feel like I've met that goal, and I've been trying to continue getting out as much as possible. Whether it's solo or if I find some girlfriends to go out with, that's always great. And there's a good little community of lady fly fishing, especially in the state of Washington. There's a huge initiative to get more women on the water and start these women's fly fishing clubs, and there's like a really supportive community here for that. In Michigan, it wasn't so much so I ended up fishing a lot, solo a lot in Michigan, but it was still fun. I still had a blast. I got lost a lot, lost a ton of flies, just like lost a ton of fish, like failed miserably so much, but I think I'm maybe starting to get a little bit of the hang of it.
Well, that's great. Yeah, we are seeing a lot more lady anglers. What why do you feel that it's so good for a female angler to be part of that community? I mean, what is it about it that, it's traditionally a man's sport, and as we're
Yeah.
seeing this transition, I mean, what makes it so great from a female's perspective?
I would say it's something being traditionally male oriented. It's very similar to fire in that regard. In like it's male oriented. It's only for the guys. And when you go out and you succeed in doing it, and you catch your own fish, and you maybe tied the fly that you caught it on, or you tied all the knots yourself, or you did like made one of these small wins in catching that fish on your own. It's so empowering. It's so exciting. You didn't have a guy there doing all the work for you, and so you realize that you are capable of more than you think you are. And I think a lot of women need that, especially it's really cool to see a lot of older women getting out and like fishing without their husbands, going out and fishing with their girlfriends, and like finding this passion on their own with or without their husbands. And I think a lot of women maybe don't have that empowering thing in their life where they're able to go out and they're able to like make all these they're able to learn all these things and catch a fish and do so maybe with or without their husband. Doing it with your friends is really fun too. And I guess I'm kind of rambling, but I do kind of equate it almost to the feeling that I got in fire as well, like going out and doing these things that maybe you didn't think were possible, maybe you didn't think you were capable of, maybe you thought were too hard, and actually going out and doing it and succeeding and catching fish, fighting fire, doing any of these things, it's incredible. And I think a lot of women find a good home in that.
Now there are a lot of our demographic. I mean, we do have some female anglers that listen, and some people that I know that listen that may not be anglers yet, but they they ask me questions. Like, where do I
Hmm.
start, or what do I do? What
Hmm.
would be a good way for a female to get involved into the sport? I mean, how what would you suggest? Like, what are those starting points?
I would say there's been an onslaught of women's fly fishing clubs that have popped up all over the country. They're from like Maine to I've even seen a few pop up in Michigan. The West Coast is teeming with women's fly with women's fly fishing clubs. So I would say reach out, find your local TU, and see if they have a women's initiative or women's chair, an initiative chair, or a women's organization. Because more than likely they have one, or somebody is in the process of developing one. Especially if there's a lot of notable rivers nearby, or it's a very heavy fly fishing area. I would say any Western state would have one within a couple of hours, and it's absolutely worth reaching out to the local TU and seeing what there is available, because going out for that first time and learning with among other women is super important. I think having learned from a guy, they kind of expect you to know these things. They expect you to know these knots, and they expect you to know these flies, and you're like, I have no clue what's going on right now. Like, what is a royal coachman, and why do I care? And so going out with women and being able to ask like what you might think are stupid questions and being answered with like a really welcoming, unintimidating vibe is, I think, really important for any woman, regardless of whether or not they're intimidated by guys or not. Or not intimidated by guys, but like intimidated by walking into a fly shop and being like, hey, does anybody want to go fishing this afternoon? I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, some women can do that, and it's totally cool, and like that's great, and it's impressive. But for the women that are like less likely to just walk into a fly shop and look fishing, or like ask about rivers, it's nice to have a women's club, like those women's organizations, to foster that growth, like that passion, that growth. And they're holding events. They're having women come to these hops and hackle events, and learning how to tie, and learning how to go out and do everything on their own, and learning not the rivers that they maybe wouldn't have otherwise known about. And yeah, and just fostering that.
And just for the record, I still kind of get intimidated when I go into the fly shop. So
I think, does everybody? Maybe everyone does. Maybe, yeah.
I don't know if there's this fly shop here locally. I'm not going to name the names, but the guy there sells me for somehow I spend $50 there every time I walk in the door at
Right.
least. And I don't know how he does it, but I'm like, sure, I'll take that one. He looks
That's
deeply.
awesome.
He looks deeply in my eyes, and my wallet just magically comes out of my pocket. I don't.
That's so funny. That's awesome. That
Yeah.
sounds about right. I think that's a pretty common problem, actually, walking into fly shops. It's a dangerous game.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Now you don't only you're not only a fly angler, but I mean, you take this thing to another level. I mean, you write for the Flyfish Journal. Am I correct?
Yeah. I just got a job there. I'm part time. I'm contributing editing, so I'm just contributing on a more frequent basis with them.
So how did that come about?
Well, I interned with them in 2012, and I've been continuing to contribute to them. And I'm kind of under the impression that they are seeing the changes in the industry and seeing that there's a new demographic that needs to be answered to. And only way to do that, I think that they understand and that they're acknowledging, is to have a woman staff. And so it's me and like two guys, got a photo editor and then the editor, Steve Duda. And it's been really fun to work with them and to bring a different perspective to things. It's always, like they've been concerned about how some stories are coming in about like midlife crises, however that plural is.
Chrysai, is that how you say
Crises,
it?
and and divorce and death and like all these like really sort of heavy topics that come up like in midlife.
Uh-huh.
And so I think they're trying to find some more refreshing angles, and not just from like women, but just from the younger generation. And they called me in May and they were like, "Hey, we're interested in having you on. Like they're taking fly shows this year, so I'm going to the fly fishing show in Atlanta and New Jersey and Seattle on behalf of them, and I'm going to be at the Flyfish Journal booth. So if anybody listening is going to be there, come and see me at the Flyfish Journal booth." But going to these fly shows and talking to people and trying to get people to subscribe and just letting them know about the journal, because we don't have much of an East Coast presence yet.
So let me ask you this question. I mean, where at in Michigan did you grow up, Amanda?
Indian River, so just south, like I said, about 30 minutes off the Mackinac Bridge on I-75.
Okay. Now you grew up there. You said Indian River.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So you grew up in Indian River, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
And when you were a little girl and growing up in Michigan, did you aspire to contributing to a fly fishing journal, to the Fly Fishing Journal, and to fighting fires? Or what was it as a child, what was it something that you wanted to do? What was your passion growing up?
Oh my God, I wanted to be an archaeologist so bad for like 10 years of my life. I wanted to be an archaeologist. Yeah, I was obsessed with history. And it was so obsessive. It was weird, probably. Actually, I was probably the weirdest kid in my elementary school. Like, just like, not really, but just like obsessing over history books and obsessing over just going to history museums and going to. I remember going to like a dig site at like Fort Michilimackinac, and like watching archaeologists at a dig site, and they weren't doing anything interesting at all. They were literally just like brushing off rocks. And I was like so infatuated. I was like, this is what I want to do. But that changed. I got actually more interested in skiing than fly fishing early on. Like I really wanted to work in the ski industry from an early age, and like growing up in Michigan on those molehills, like I don't know what it is about those molehills, but they pump out some like really good, not only skiing talent, but just like ski culture. I don't know what it is. Like growing up at Nubs Knob, like I had a great time spending like every waking hour that I wasn't at home, or home or school, I was at Nubs Knob skiing, which is what I ended up going to Funny Feelings, which is the company I work for now. They actually produce a ski journal as well. And so that was the reason that I came out to Bellingham for my internship originally, was a ski journal. And then I've sort of since then developed a passion for fly fishing as well. So it's been cool to be able to work with both titles since I've been here and since I interned with them. But I would say like the skiing thing was the reason that I kind of got out of Michigan, was how much I loved skiing and the mountains and loved ski culture. And then once I got out here, it was kind of like I started meeting people that were into firefighting, and it became one of those things like, if they can do it, I can do it. Because like for a while, the only people I knew that were fighting fire were women. So I was like, okay, yeah, like this is totally something I can do. and got into that relatively recently, having never really cared about fighting fire. My dad is a volunteer firefighter on like the local structural department in Indian River, but it was always just like an annoying thing. Like, and his pager would go off in the middle of the night and he had to go respond to fires. It was always just like kind of part of my life, like my dad going off to fires in the middle of the night, or going to Jaws of Life runs, like when we're at like family gatherings and stuff. So I guess that was kind of subtly part of my life, and like maybe subtly a reason that I got into fire, was knowing that my dad did it. And I went and like watched him fight fire a couple times, like on structure fires, and that was like pretty fascinating. But I wouldn't say I ever thought of myself as a firefighter until I actually thought of myself as a firefighter like 2 years ago.
Can I ask you this question? As far as, the firefighter families, are firefighter families usually multi-generational?
Yeah, it seems like in wildland fire that actually happens pretty often. Like, you get families that the moms and the dads were both wildland firefighters and met, and then they have like these like super children that are also firefighters and like are on hotshot crews and like smoke jumping and stuff. And so that's pretty cool. I haven't seen a lot of it, but the kids I do know that came from wildland fire relationships are like extremely good athletes, extremely good firefighters. That's just my personal experience, of course, but I would say maybe like that first responder mentality might be generational, though. It seems like I know a lot of firefighters whose parents were either like paramedics or firefighters or policemen or something like that. It seems like that first responder vibe goes down the line a little bit.
Yeah, we had some neighbors growing up who were firefighters, and their parents were firefighters, and it was it's almost like its own family. All the firefighters would come together for barbecues there, and they had their own subculture,
Yeah.
So I would assume it kind of gets in your blood.
It does. It's a really like consuming thing. It's I think like that family, the thing that the fact that you're having barbecues with your fire family is like very indicative of what happens in any sort of first responder experience. But like, you're with these people all the time, and you're like responding to these really high risk incidents with them, and you get to know them on like a way deeper level than everyone else in your life. It seems like, especially because you're spending every waking hour with them for basically entire days at a time for 6 months. So you end up getting so close to these people, and it really does make it all consuming, because you have that camaraderie, and you have like the physical work, which is weirdly addicting, and then you have like the actual like good, like the humanitarian, whatever, philanthropic side of it, where you're like maybe doing something good for society, maybe. So that's all. It all kind of contributes to it being really addicting.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Now, the reason I'm asking these questions, about being multi-generational, and then, but before I go there though, did you study journalism in college, or how did you end up writing?
Yeah, I grew up and I was a documenter. I was like obsessed with documenting things, and my mom to this day is like, I can't believe how many journals you kept as a kid. Because I kept journals like compulsively from the age of like, from I think third grade on. I have journals dating back to third grade.
Wow.
And then just like taking photos and like making scrapbooks, and like always documenting everything and making sure that I have very good documentation of all these events in my life. And it's like kind of weird, but also I think that contributed well to journalism. And I ended up on my like high school yearbook crew, and in high school, and I was on that crew. I was on the high school yearbook class for 4 years. And we like were super nerdy, and we went to like yearbook camps and yearbook workshops and yearbook conventions. And like, I think that all really helped me. It helped me so much, though, like being exposed to really good writing at an early age, and like really good design and really good photography, and like knowing what was possible with that line of work from an early age kind of pushed me into that path pretty early. And then I did journalism. I did like nonfiction writing, creative writing in college at Northern Michigan University. It's no Berkeley, but it got the job done. And I'm kind of proud of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think it would be a great college to go to, but it's just awfully cold there.
It is cold. I love it though. It's like I love those extremes. Growing up in Michigan, I like crave extremes like that, like really hot or really cold.
Yeah.
So living in Bellingham, it's like always 50 degrees here. I feel like always, all the time. It always feels like a spring, like late spring, or it's like drizzling. You know, it's very mild, but I kind of crave like. I went home for Christmas and it was like negative 15 every day, and I'm like, this is my home. This is where I belong.
Yeah, I'm from the south of Houston, in the middle of refineries, and it stinks really bad there, and it's gross and hot and humid and mosquitoes everywhere. But when I go home, it's home, and
it's so home.
It's
yeah.
something about it, you know. It's like it's familiar. You grew up there, you know.
Yep, I love me some Michigan for sure.
Now, so the reason I ask all these questions, I mean, it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were kind of weird in school. Those are your words. And then you love
not super weird. Okay. I feel like I'm gonna have friends listen to this and they're gonna be like, you were not that weird. But like looking back, I'm like, I was a girl like reading about Pompeii all the time, and like Titanic and like World War II and like Hitler. I feel like I just like had a weird obsessions.
Right. But I think that's great. I think that's, I mean, the whole thing with, I interview a lot of people in the business. I interview a lot of random people that just fly fish. And it seems like, you know, and on this podcast, we really want to focus, Amanda, and we really focus on the philosophy behind fly fishing. You know, I'm not going to tell you, you know, what hatch to match. You know, I'm not going to, you know, we talk a little bit of nuts and bolts, but really we focus on that heart, that soul of the sport. And, you know, when you tell me that you loved history, you know, and you were kind of obsessed and had a little strange season there, you know, when you tell me that you love extremes, when you tell me that you love journaling, which is so detailed, and when you're tying flies and when you're casting, everything has to be so detailed. Like you have the DNA of a very fine angler. So like, it's so funny to hear you talk, because so many people I talk to that fly fish, they appreciate the history of fly fishing as much as they appreciate going fly fishing. And some people get obsessed with the history of fly fishing, you know? So I just think it's really cool that I really think it's cool at what you're doing and how you're representing the female angler and the growing sport and all that you're doing. So thank you very much for all.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for, that's great.
What I'm going to do, Amanda, is I'm going to go ahead and put your website on our blog so people can check it out, right? I mean, it's amandamonthei.com, or where would people find you, Amanda?
That's perfect, right there. And then my Instagram as well, which is like A and then that under dash thingy, and Monthei, my last name.
Under dash thingy? Aren't you an editor of like a very...
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is I just look at it all day. I don't have to say it out loud.
Okay. Well, okay. What I will do too is we'll tag you in the post. So, cool. And also what we're going to do is put up a link to TU's main homepage, and any female angler or someone who may have stumbled on this podcast who may be wanting to get into angling, you can go to our website at remotenopressure.com. And we'll have a TU. TU stands for Trout Unlimited, for people who may not be familiar with that. And you can find a local chapter, or you can email me, and we can, if you're in Michigan, email me and we will hook you up with who you need to get hooked up with, because there are some people locally that we can definitely hook you up with. Well, thank you very much, Amanda, for being with us.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Hey, no problem. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you for tuning in for another week of the Remote No Pressure Podcast. Be sure to tune in every Sunday night for new episodes. Don't forget to go to our website at remotenopressure.com, sign up for our mailing list, and join us on our journey. Also, whatever platform you use, iTunes, Google Play, whatever you're using, leave a review. It helps. Until next time, go fishing.